Welcome to a new episode of the Stick and Move podcast. I'm your host, Trey, and today we're talking about one of the biggest what ifs in boxing history. What if Mike Tyson never went to prison? So before I want to get into that. I'm going to go ahead. I want to shout out a couple of commenters, specifically Tony Jimenez, 7137. Hope that leg heals up quick, Trey. Hope Sam's situation gets better. Also, good to see you back on the channel. Canelo's still the number one current pound for pound in his opinion. At 540 PTF, let's go. And I'll be honest with you guys, those 2 weeks that we took off or that I took off healing and trying to recover, I wanted to get back into this as well. The famous Akeem McCall, sorry about your leg, Trey. We will pray for Sam and his family. Thank you, Akeem McCall. That means a lot to me and everybody here on the podcast. And if you guys look at our comment history, him and I tend to go back and forth a lot on Canelo's legacy, if he's a legend or not, or this, his previous bouts. Phenomenal boxing historian Akeem McCall is always keeping me on my toes. And then there's also P. Fitzger 2E1. Hope your leg gets better, Trey. Always said Fury was overrated. Usyk is number one. And yes, um, the last episode I did my top five current pound for pound because a lot of boxing's been going on from April and May that I had to give a new top five pound for pound. But let's get to the new episode. So go ahead and leave comments, guys. I'll respond. I'll shout you guys out as much as possible. And don't forget to like and subscribe. I appreciate the love. Okay. So what if Mike Tyson never went to prison? I want to go back a little bit to the 80s version of Mike Tyson. We got to recall something. The reason why this what if is so important, in my opinion, is because he took boxing to a new height that we haven't seen in boxing history. Now, have there been great uppercut, left hook, right hook artists throughout boxing history? Of course, right? Talking about Lewis, we're talking about Sonny Liston, we're talking about George Foreman, we're talking about Joe Frazier, right? Hagler, he wasn't a heavyweight, but these are guys that captivated the boxing and sports world audience by their aggressive, stoic way of fighting. Then here comes this kid named Mike Tyson with his murdered out black trunks coming into the heavyweight realm, you know, training with the 84 Olympic boxing team. Never made the team. He never made the team. Um, but he had that history with that great class. Comes into his own, becomes the youngest heavyweight champion at 20 years old, claiming the WBA, the WBC uh, championship belts by defeating the big bad boogeyman at the time, Spinks, which Sam and I have had episodes, countless episodes, talking about if that fight was actually thrown or not. And in my opinion, it kind of looked like Michael Spinks may have taken a dive a little bit, but if you're gonna come in like that kind of aggression, I guarantee you Spinks has never seen a furious tornado uh whipping arms like Mike Tyson did in that first round and claimed them and claimed his belts and his titles and his soul in that phantom maybe thrown knockout, because to be honest with you, that was always the conversation. I remember having these conversations as kids about Mike Tyson. Okay. I remember they would always ask for $1 million. Maybe you guys can quote this on the comment section. For $1 million, would you go one round with Mike Tyson? That was always the conversation everybody had. Would you go for $1 million to fight him? And Michael Spinks answered that question for all of us. He could not do it, and he was a champion, an underrated great champion. Controversial subject. That's a conversation for another day. But look, this is a guy that captivated the world. He looked unbeatable. His way of training with that peekaboo aggressive style, taking Joe Frazier's peekaboo like style another two or three or five or 10 notches above him, and just really intimidating who or what a boxer should be in Mike Tyson. Now, there's a lot of people, a lot of historians that said that, I mean, and we've said it on this podcast too. I know I said it. We had the top three most overrated boxers of all time, and he was my number one. And the reason why, because look, he was set up. Don King set him up to fight tomato cans because not because maybe he couldn't handle the big names in the 80s, but maybe he wanted, in my opinion, Don King was more, he realized, he saw the bigger picture that people don't want to see him in a 12, 15 round bout, going the distance, struggling. They want to see the show. They want to see a boxer who can knock down with a hellacious uppercut or left or right hook to the body from Mike Tyson, and somebody going down in that first, second, third round in the most turbulent form of violence with leather gloves as possible. Don King knew that. Don King exploited that. And you know what? It made Mike Tyson a rich man and created a legacy beyond boxing. Even to this day, people will claim Mike Tyson is the greatest. Believe me, we have plenty of comments that say he is, and plenty of comments that agree with me that he is overrated. So I want to go to the fateful night. Okay, before he got arrested, as a matter of fact, um, he would fight the infamous night in Tokyo with Buster Douglas. Now, Buster Douglas was a relative unknown. He was a 40 or 41 or 42 to 1 odds of winning that fight against Mike Tyson. And the fact that it took place in Tokyo, you know, a lot of people weren't able to watch it. I remember waking up to the news. There were news media outlets that don't prioritize boxing. And here is those channels talking. Now, granted, there weren't that many channels like today, but they were talking about this major upset in not only boxing history but sports history. We got to realize something. When Buster Douglas knocked out Mike Tyson in that 10th round, where Mike Tyson was stumbling for that mouthpiece, that iconic super fast count, depending on what conspiracy theory you want to believe in, Mike Tyson going down and losing that fight, the most unbeatable looking heavyweight at that time, not only shook the sports world, but shook the entire planet into a global earthquake, rattling off tsunamis and changing the course of planet Earth. Okay, I might be exaggerating, or maybe not. But look, one thing I do know is that for Mike Tyson to lose that night, it was the conversation, it was the talk of the town for the next few weeks until the next major bout came. But and I got to give it to Buster Douglas. He goes down earlier in that fight. Most boxers that have fought Mike Tyson, when they went down, they never came back up. Very rarely. Very rarely. And here comes Buster Douglas coming up from the mat, surviving. Nobody even knows how he survived to get down and to come back up. And he finishes the bout to Mike Tyson. So, what was next for Mike Tyson? Okay. What was next? Remember, there was a lot of speculation that before Buster Douglas, it was going to be him and Evander Holyfield. Evander Holyfield was making his claim after coming out of cruiserweight as a major champion, defeating Tillman, which we'll talk about again in a second, and becoming the champion. And then working his way up the past couple of years, also fighting. I mean, look, the late 80s, early 90s wasn't a good era for heavyweight boxers. Probably the weakest since 2000 to 2010 era. You can kind of claim the 2020 to 2024 era now is kind of weak as well. I'm not downplaying Usyk at all, but The late 80s, early 90s era of the heavyweight division was, I hate to say it, straight trash, homie, you know? And for that bout was going to happen, Buster Douglas steps in, takes the crown from Mike Tyson. Buster Douglas will go down very quickly against Evander Holyfield, lose his, and Evander Holyfield will take the belts. But look, what was next for Mike Tyson after going down? He would fight Tillman, knock him out in the first round. He would fight um, Alex Stewart. I remember that. He would knock him out in the first round. Very simply, very easy. And people were like, well, maybe the way he lost to Buster Douglas, that is the blueprint. Fighting these bigger boxers when he already fought some, but he fought a bigger boxer with skill and a stiff jab and patience and using their size. That is the antidote to fighting Mike Tyson. Little did they know, Tillman and Alex Stewart, they were also 6'3" and a half, 6'4". But they got into the cage, they got into the phone booth, they challenged Mike Tyson, and we know the rest there. They both went down in the first round. Then what happens after that? Razor Ruddock comes in. Also 6'3", 6'4", 220 something. I think their rematch, he was 230. And Razor Ruddock in that first fight, it would be a TKO in the seventh round. But Razor Ruddock put on a great show. A lot of people feel that that technical knockout that Mike Tyson had over Ruddock was not really called for. That there was some kind of robbery, which granted the rematch. Mike Tyson's like, yeah, let's do the rematch, and they would go the distance to rematch. Unfortunately, after that fight, now people were believing the blueprint. Is it size? Does Mike Tyson struggle with size and a boxer with patience and a stiff jab? What was Mike Tyson's future after going the distance with Razor Ruddock? He had only gone the distance 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He went the distance with Tony Tucker, with Bone Crusher Smith, infamously in 12 rounds, and he wouldn't do that again until he fought Razor Ruddock the second time. Now, we wanted to know the future. Was the future set up for Mike Tyson versus Evander Holyfield so if Mike Tyson can stake his claim? Unfortunately, we would never know. February 10th, 1992, he would get accused for raping Desiree Washington, who was a beauty pageant contestant, and he would be convicted for rape for 10 years, only serving 3. And
Good evening, I'm Hugh Downs.
And I'm Barbara Walters, and this is 2020.
From ABC News, around the world and into your home. He was known worldwide as a heavyweight champ. Now he's known as a rapist. Mike Tyson could spend many years in prison. Some still believe he's innocent. If you're unsure, listen to his accuser. Tonight, in her first interview, she talks to Barbara Walters.
I decided to do this interview, and only this interview, because there are so many unanswered questions, so many things that weren't covered or that didn't come out.
And I remember watching the news media at the time showing Mike Tyson getting out of prison.
Now, a new CNN Time magazine poll shows differing views among whites and African Americans about whether Mike Tyson did indeed get a fair trial. 73% of African Americans surveyed think Tyson was treated unfairly, compared with 30% of whites. 54% of white respondents said Tyson's trial was fair, compared to the 30% who said it was not. Only 18% of the African Americans questioned thought Tyson got a fair trial, compared to the 73% who said the former heavyweight champ did receive unfair treatment. Right now, we understand that former boxing champion Mike Tyson is about to leave his jail, and CNN's Jeff Flock is standing by in Plainfield, ready to tell us all about it. Jeff?
Yes, Ralph, Mike Tyson's released from prison now after 1,095 days, just moments away. We were told by officials at the Indiana Youth Center here outside Indianapolis, here in Plainfield, Indiana, that Mike Tyson will be emerging sometime in the next 2 moments. We see him inside now. Mike Tyson surrounded by an entourage. I'm looking for Don King. I do see Don King. This is the Mike Tyson entourage now emerging from the prison after, as we said, 1,095 days. A number of people have come, international press contingent as well. As you can see, one of his bodyguards trying to shield Mike Tyson from view, and I don't think we're going to get much of a picture of him. John Horn, I see there. I see Rory Holloway, two of his longtime friends. There's Don King. You see Mike in the white cap. A very brief picture of Mike Tyson. Don King now entering the limousine as well. That's John Horn right behind him. And Rory Holloway in the white shirt now, as you see, entering the limousine as well. Those are two of his longtime friends. Of course, Don King, his longtime promoter. Mike Tyson with the white cap, we are told, has converted and is now a Muslim. Speculation, or I should say a report, that his new Muslim name will be Malik. Unclear about whether or not he will fight with that name or not, and unclear about whether he will fight or not at all. But now, for whatever the future holds for him, with a lead car and a limousine and cars to follow, Mike Tyson leaves the Indiana Youth Center with the tinted glass. We don't get very much of a picture, but after 1,095 days spent here, this has been his home. By most accounts, not a tremendously comfortable one. It will now be much more comfortable. You can see the cars begin now to make it toward the gate. Outside the gates of the youth center, hundreds, by my guess, people, onlookers outside there to cheer as he goes by. Perhaps you can hear in the air television news choppers that will document where he goes from here. Mike Tyson is an international celebrity, primarily by dint of his boxing abilities, but obviously some international.
Okay. And look, that was a moment that was going to be, people were already anticipating, okay, is the old Mike Tyson back? I remember having conversations at school with my fellow classmates, and they were saying, man, he went to prison. You know, now he's going to be ripped up in prison. Now he's extra hard. He's pissed off. Nobody's going to want to fight with Mike Tyson now. And sure enough, that's what it looked like. Now, after 3 years of not fighting, he would take another year off. He would come back after 4 years and, you know, go back to what he did back then. And look, I kind of understand him coming back to fight against tomato cans. I mean, after 4 years, you kind of want to do the same thing. Even Muhammad Ali, after his suspension, he took 2 tune-up fights, and then he fought Joe Frazier in the fight of the century. Mike Tyson, he would come back after his 4 years, and like I said, understandably challenge Peter McNeely. He would fight Buster Mathis, knocking him out in the 3rd round. He would fight Frank Bruno, Selden, and, you know, eventually losing the Holyfield twice. For Mike Tyson, in my opinion, what would have happened if he never went to prison? I honestly think after Buster Douglas, Alex Stewart going the distance with Razor Ruddock, I think Don King would have kept his hands on him, and he would have tried to build up the spectacle. We got to remember something. The question I want to ask for you guys in the comments, go ahead and answer this question for me. In the comments, did boxing really miss Mike Tyson? Because in the 90s, you know, Mike Tyson was such a big figure in the late 80s going to the early 90s. His going to jail prison was very controversial. We kind of moved on. Julio Cesar Chavez brought in a whole new demographic of the Mexican audience to more of a commercialized economical portion of boxing. There was Roy Jones Jr. There was the 92 Olympic team with Oscar De La Hoya, the Golden Boy, coming up, setting records on pay-per-view. I mean, boxing was doing a fantastic job. And I kind of feel that if Mike Tyson never would have gone to prison, that who knows what would have happened in the 90s. Look, I kind of feel that Don King would have kept them fighting tomato cans to keep up with the spectacle of the knockouts, because I don't think he was going to throw him in there with Lennox Lewis, or an up and coming Lennox Lewis at the time. I don't think he was going to throw him in there with Riddick Bowe. But imagine if Mike Tyson never would have gone to prison, still knocking out mediocre fighters. Okay. Could boxing have elevated to the point where it would have been the number one sport? Because look what was popular in the 90s in entertainment, especially in sports. The football had the Dallas Cowboys, the number one team. They were the team of the decade. They were the dynasty. They were flash. They were controversial, right? College basketball had the UNLV running Rebels. They had the Michigan Fab Five. They had the always controversial, hated and loved Duke Blue Devils with Grant Hill and Christian Leitner. The baseball had the Yankees, right? The 90s had Michael Jordan and the Bulls. Now, and in hockey in the NHL, they had Wayne Gretzky, they had Messier and the New York Rangers, big markets, LA and New York. Sports was taking over in the 90s. It was sports catapulted, even the Olympics, the swim, the spits, um Carl Lewis with the controversy, with the steroid allegations. Okay, that was in the 80s. But you know, Carl Lewis taking over, Michael Johnson taking over the 200 and the 4 and the 100 meters, Donovan Bailey. I remember all that stuff. And imagine if Mike Tyson would have been a part of it, not getting going to prison for 3 years. I mean, who knows what could have happened to boxing, and it would have gone up even more. It would have been even more elevated. Maybe even catapulting boxing to a point to where boxing becomes the number one sports because of the personalities. Look, there was also Pernell Whitaker, was also a beloved boxing guy. There was the Puerto Rican Felix Trinidad, right? Bernard Hopkins was coming up as well. The 90s had something special to say, and boxing was toe to toe with them without Mike Tyson. If Mike Tyson never went to prison, I honestly think they would have set up Mike Tyson to continuously fighting maybe that second tier. Look, boxing also had great second tier boxers like Tommy Morrison, David Tua. They also had let me see here, Andrew Galata. They had Big George Foreman. Everybody always wanted to have that conversation. Who would have won the fight, George Foreman or Mike Tyson? Shannon Briggs, Michael Moore. You know, there was a great second tier that I think Mike Tyson could have dominated, avoiding the top tier, in my opinion, of Lennox Lewis. He did fight Evander Holyfield or Riddick Bowe before Riddick Bowe, unfortunately, became a little bit, um, undisciplined. I honestly think that Mike Tyson, in my opinion, if he did not go to prison, could have elevated boxing to a plateau unforeseen in not only boxing history, but sports history. Look, I got to be honest with you. It gets me excited to ask the what if. What if Mike Tyson never went to prison? Was the blueprint out? Did Buster Douglas exposed the blueprint, whether you if you have size and you have discipline and patience and that stiff jab, that you can defeat a young, hungry, aggressive, unbeatable Mike Tyson? Was that the MO on how to defeat such a young boxing legend? Would he have would the future have been the same if he never gone to prison? And let's say, if he never would have lost those 4 years and fought Evander Holyfield after Alex Stewart, or fought Riddick Bowe after Alex Stewart, or even Lennox Lewis, get them when they're a little bit younger. I honestly think they would have had their way with him. But in my opinion, I think also Mike Tyson because of the spectacle he was. And let's not forget something. At that time, nobody cared about undefeated records. Okay? They would have challenged each other. I think Don King would have gradually had the Evander Holyfield happen sooner. I mean, yeah, Evander Holyfield fight happen sooner. I think he would have fought Lennox Lewis. I think he would have fought Riddick Bowe as well, of course, earlier. And who knows? Who knows? I think Mike Tyson, after his fight with Buster Douglas, was on a revenge tour. Unfortunately, he would lose his discipline. His life was being exposed in the media, and I think that kind of overtook his mental focus on boxing, and unfortunately, kind of caught up on him. But the what if, oh man, it's up there. It's probably, in my opinion, one of the most important what ifs, not only in boxing history, in sports history. If he never would have gone to prison, where would have boxing have been? And I'll be honest with you, I think Tyson's record would look the exact same. 50-6. I think he would have lost to Lewis. He would have lost to Holyfield. He would have lost to Riddick Bowe. I honestly think Ray Mercer probably would have had his way with them. I could see one of that second tier group, David Tua. I could see Morrison. I could see Galata or Briggs having their way with them, especially Galata because he was such a dirty fighter. I mean, I know Tyson beat him eventually later on, and it was a no contest. But if he would have fought him 5 years earlier, because if I'm not mistaken, Mike Tyson Galata fought in 99, 2000, 2001. If he would have fought him in 97, 98, something like that, it could have been a different fight. I think he would have had Tyson would have gone down. I maybe even George Foreman would have beaten Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson, George Foreman had that discipline. He had that side. Yes, was he a softer version of what he was in the 70s? Absolutely. But I think George Foreman could have pulled it off. I mean, by no means was he soft. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying he's soft. But it's just an interesting time. Boxing was doing so well without him, anyways. Roy Jones was killing it. De La Hoya was killing it. Like I said, Chavez was bringing a whole new audience. Imagine if Tyson never would have made his crucial mistake and would have changed the sports world, not even boxing. And I honestly think that would have ran a momentum into the 2000s, as the 2000s was more of an era of the featherweights and the bantamweights and the lightweights with Morales and early on Pacquiao, early on Mayweather. Um, those divisions were taking over while the heavyweight and the light heavyweights were dominating the mid to early 90s going into 2000s. I think that would it influence a newer generation of boxers to be more aggressive, to be more accountable, and maybe carry the torch that great class of 1990s boxers had and elevated another few decades? And who knows? Maybe the lackluster division of the heavyweight division of the last 24 years could have been a little bit better if Mike Tyson never would have gone to prison. So I'll leave it at that, guys. In the comments, tell me what you think. What if Mike Tyson never went to prison? I'm actually curious to how you think boxing would have looked like, or maybe how Mike Tyson's career would have looked like. I've heard people say that because of his life falling apart already, that he was something was doomed to happen to him eventually. Maybe not prison, but some kind of suspension of sorts. Tell me what you guys think. Would Don King have had too much of his hand in his future for him to prosper? Tell me what you think in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And as I always like to say, don't forget to stick and move, baby.